Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Let's get started. Delighted to be joined today by Olivier Mussat, Chief Executive Officer of Atome. His colleague Nikita Levine will be joining for the Q&A session. With regards to Q&A, if you'd like to ask a question, please either raise your hand and I will unmute you, or alternatively, you can just type your question into the Q&A box and I will read the question out. I will be collecting feedback from you at the end, so please do be ready for that. But I will hand over to Olivier now. He will take you through the slides. Over to you, Olivier.
All right, thank you very much, Nick. I'm cognizant this is 5 minutes pitch and it's not going to be 5 minutes, so apologies on that. So we will share what I think we've been sharing for the past couple of weeks, which is very much the presentation of where we are today, what we have achieved over the past, well, nearly 24 months of existence. If you wanted actually more info, I would refer you back to our website in the news section, where we have put together a nearly 20 minutes video going over the company, the fertilizer and agri industry, the project, and the macroeconomic environment, which you may find useful. However, we'll get started on the presentation now. So if we could have the first slides, please. Usual disclaimer. So Atome, who are we? For those who don't know us, we are the first company and still the only company listed on the London Stock Exchange on AIM, which is a pure play developer of hydrogen to ammonia to fertilizer projects. So whilst we absolutely believe in hydrogen economy, and hydrogen is kind of a hype, but actually you can make products which have a real market today. I think we've heard a lot about hydrogen cars, the difficulty of scaling up. What people are forgetting is that hydrogen is an existing industrial gas, which has existing uses, and which is ammonia, which is fertilizer. We'll go in and get into these details. So we are currently in the process on our fast track to find an investment decision on the largest industrial scale green fertilizer facility, which is codenamed Villeta, which is the port where it is being built. And it's 145 megawatts of power supply that we are getting from the grid, which will deliver about 200 and up to 270,000 tons of green calcium ammonium nitrate fertilizer, and coming from the Ygazu dam, which is the second largest hydroelectric dam in the world. This is a project which is going to generate significant revenue by itself. Again, fertilizers are an existing market, and also will displace the more hydrocarbon-based products, which is why we've estimated that we could displace up to 500,000 tons a year of carbon emission from that one project. So we're talking about 13 million tons of carbon over the lifetime of that one project. But I will go into the next slide, please. So I think the idea of going into the green hydrogen, green ammonia, green fertilizer economy is great, but the reality is you need a team of people to deliver it. So my background is I started as an engineer in the power sector with an offshoot of General Electric, or Ecolochem, where I was commissioning gas and industrial facilities, then power facilities, then moved to the oil and gas industry with Schlumberger, and then with Standard Chartered Bank, where I was financing large-scale oil and especially gas and LNG projects. And for the past 9 years before the creation of Atome, I was with the International Finance Corporation, which is the investment arm of the World Bank. So we had about $7 billion portfolio of investments around equity and debt in power, oil and gas, and renewable projects. And in this time, I was obviously looking very aggressively at scaling up the hydrogen and battery storage portfolio. So it was really about putting together a strong strategy over there, and realizing that whilst you had a large amount of capital available for the right projects, you didn't have that many right projects, which is, as I was discussing with Peter, who's our chairman and largest shareholder, who had been maturing Atome and leveraging on their experience in Latin America. That we saw a meeting of mine and for me to jump ship from a purely financial role and investor role into leading the creation and then the execution of Atome. Peter, who is, as I mentioned, is our largest shareholder, also had a successful track record into the energy world, especially with Imperial Energy. He then created President Energy, which IFC was an investor in. But importantly, he was also the chairman of a number of engineering companies. And I think it shouldn't be underestimated that in the end, we're looking at large-scale projects, large-scale engineering projects, and it's all about margins, right? It's not about looking at this great upside. It's all about how can you produce things faster and cheaper than anybody else. So he really brings that discipline into the team. Then we went about making sure that for the markets that we are in, we have the best people on the ground. Obviously, these are high development impact projects, which are very important to deliver with the right people in the locations. And this is where, after spending quite a number of months finding the right people, that we have met Jim, so Jim Spalding. His name is very American sounding because his father is American, but he is Paraguayan by birth. He worked as a civil servant for nearly all of his career. And importantly, he was the managing director for the Itaipu Dam for nearly 5 years. He was also Minister of Finance in the government, and he served under 6 presidents. So he really brings this very good balance of actual knowledge of the energy sector, as well as understanding the political environment and the political economy environment to enable the project to move at pace. We also have Mayrose Devadas on the board. She was originally at the International Energy Agency's hydrogen unit for nearly 15 years, and she was quite instrumental into helping us accelerate our understanding within the hydrogen sector, also our credibility, and finding out, okay, who is real and who isn't real, because it's all about getting behind the brochure. We saw a lot of other excitement, and we identified that as a weakness early on about making sure we were working with the right partners. And the most recent addition to the team was Terje Bakken. Terje used to be the executive VP of 2 of the largest fertilizer companies in the world, namely, Yara and then Eurochem. So he really brings that market knowledge, how to make sure that once we produce that ammonia for fertilizer, how do we find the best market for this green fertilizer? So next slide, please. So for those of you who may not know about the hydrogen side, so there are 2 ways of getting hydrogen. So at the moment, most of our hydrogen is called gray hydrogen, which is made from natural gas or coal. It's about separating the CH, so carbon and hydrogen, into obviously carbon, hydrogen. But to make 1 molecule of hydrogen today, you generate actually a lot of carbon emissions. And it's a lot more actually than using regular natural gas. However, we've known for over 100 years that you can take a lot of power and crack water, H2O, so separate the oxygen and the hydrogen. And if you use renewable electricity, obviously not coal-fired power, you actually call it green hydrogen. And if you have very competitive cost of electricity, you can produce it for cheaper than natural gas-based hydrogen. So it's all about finding the lowest cost of power available and base load power, i.e. 24/7, not going up and down like you have with solar and wind, which obviously you can do it as well, but remembering that we are mixing an electrical process and a chemical process, and whilst electricity, you can turn it on and off, when it comes to chemical, you need to be running 24/7 if you want to be efficient. So once you have done that and you've been able to produce hydrogen at a very low cost, you have different markets. And so you can either have, obviously, hydrogen into cars, into mobility. You can use it for synthetic fuels. You can use it for ammonia. But actually, the biggest market today for hydrogen is towards the chemical industry. So we believe in the future of transport. Don't get me wrong. We believe that hydrogen can be used into the heating system. Well, actually, if we look at, in the 70s or 60s, sorry, we used to have city gas, town gas, which was, a large amount of hydrogen from coal. The reality is today's market is fully on the industrial side and actually fully on the ammonia side. So for us, it was about, let's take the supply risk away. So use existing power today at low cost into an existing market today, which is the $200 billion a year plus fertilizer market. So next slide, please. So how do you make it? So I just mentioned earlier, if we have, if I have renewable power, if I've got water, if I've got air, I can create green hydrogen, and then using electrolyzers, low-tech alkaline electrolyzers, because I have baseload power, I don't have technology risk. And then using the Haber-Bosch process, which is over 100 years old as well. This is the way you make fertilizers and ammonia today using Haber-Bosch. You can create ammonia, green ammonia. And in our particular case, in our first project in Paraguay, actually, we're going to be using, we're going to make ammonia into calcium ammonium nitrate, basically adding limestone to the ammonia that we have created, which pretty much makes it a very stable product that it can be shipped very easily. To give you a sense of the market today, it's nearly 200 million tons per year of ammonia, nearly $200 billion a year of fertilizer market, which in a world which today is obviously adding 1 billion people every 10 years, you can get a sense that it's a very key component that we're not going to run out of the need to eat. We might take a choice or might be forced to make choices about flying less. When it comes to eating, we will always need fertilizers. What we have seen also is that more and more we've had government supports. You've heard about the US Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. You've heard about the EU Green New Deal, the Fit for 55. So whilst you have a huge amount of subsidies being available for a number of projects, they all come for the reason that in the hydrogen sector today, a lot of them are trying to make them in Europe, in the US, where the power is very expensive, where the need to build infrastructure is very large, which choice to take away all of these risks so that we can work in a non-subsidized environment and move extremely fast at a time where the cost of fertilizer is extremely high. Moving on to the next slide, please. So it gives you a bit of an idea of what has moved actually since we've listed, right? So this is less than 2 years ago. And you see that now a number of fertilizer plants have been drastically affected as well by the increasing price of natural gas, by the increasing price of power, and also by the decarbonization issues. Right, we are now seeing fertilizer manufacturers which are closing facility. It actually happened just a few months ago in the UK, where the last ammonia facility was shut down. And this is a country in the UK which used to create nearly 2 million tons a year of fertilizers. So it gives you an idea of how much food security we are giving away, because we are short natural gas. And therefore, we have decided as a country to prioritize natural gas towards power, and then import our fertilizers. And what we are seeing now is that actually things are moving extremely fast. We've seen NEOM in Saudi Arabia securing over $5 billion of debt to finance its first large-scale green ammonia project. We've seen also carbon border adjustment mechanisms being now very clear that from 2026, a carbon border will be enforced on the import of fertilizers to try to promote domestic production of green fertilizers, or only import green fertilizers, right? We're talking about a tax of nearly $200 a ton per ton of ammonia imported. If we want to move to the next slide. So this is really just to show that, the tide, we have called it early, but obviously the war in Ukraine has accelerated things because Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine are one of the largest exporter of fertilizers globally. What we are seeing is that the business that we have been in and pushing has now got a lot of momentum behind it, and for a number of reasons. Right, number one, it's a very large market. It's a very large growing market. Number two, in our projects in Paraguay, we are looking at the ability to produce a zero carbon fertilizer in a world which is going to be forcing itself to go towards lower carbon fertilizer. And the fact also that we are seeing a number of applications which are moving away from urea. Urea was the historically largest fertilizer used, it still is today, and now being replaced by low carbon fertilizers such as calcium ammonium nitrate. So if we move to the next slide, this gives you a sense also of the fertilizer market itself, where today, because nearly 99% of all fertilizer or urea or nitrate-based fertilizer, is based from natural gas. It is completely linked to natural gases, to prices. And we are seeing, of course, that because the input of that fertilizer, natural gas or power, right? If it's green ammonia, you have green power. That what we are seeing is the fact that you have to use green power, and that in Europe, in the UK, even in the US, we're looking at power prices which are over $100 per megawatt on a long-term basis. It means that green, renewable green fertilizers are very expensive on a relative basis, even towards expensive gray natural gas-based fertilizers. So for us, we are in Paraguay, and for our first project, in a place where our cost of power is nearly a third of the lowest cost of power in Europe today. If we want to go to the next slide. And from a sustainability point of view, what we are always surprised is that we have heard a lot about decarbonizing transport, so especially aviation and shipping, and yet the fertilizer market creates more carbon emissions than fertilizer and shipping combined, right? So it's aviation and shipping combined. So for us, it's a great opportunity, right? It's to be there in a market where you have brands like Nestle, like Unilever, like Cargill, for whom the cost of fertilizer is an important part of their business, but actually it is the easiest and lowest hanging fruit for them to reduce their emissions. So if they can have access to zero carbon fertilizer, they are ready to pay a premium for that fertilizer because it has a very immediate impact on their ability to get into the net zero, and obviously come out to the market and the same way that we have seen the push for sustainable coffee, you will see the push for zero carbon agri products. And if we look at, for example, our own markets, where we're looking about sugar, sugarcane, coffee, bananas, pineapple. These are all products which have a very high carbon footprint today, which can easily be reduced with the production of green fertilizers. If we go to the next slide. And so the opportunity where Paraguay, well, the reason and the choice for Paraguay comes from a long analysis, right? It's all about making sure that you are able to produce with the lowest cost of power available and especially using hydroelectric power because it's stable 24/7. And in the world, the largest exporter of hydroelectric power is actually Paraguay. It's home to the 14 gigawatt Itaipu Dam, the second largest hydro in the world, but it only uses about 30% of its own share of Itaipu and exports everything else into Brazil and Argentina. So it was a great opportunity for us to look and basically, quote unquote, buy power, available power today, and create a new economy, which obviously makes the government very attuned to your needs to accelerate your project. And thinking that actually we are in Paraguay, in the middle of Mercosur, which is an economic community of the southern cone of Latin America, which is the world's largest importer of fertilizers. So green is great, but green is only good if you are competitive with everything else. And to import fertilizers into Brazil, into Paraguay, has very high logistical costs. So it's not just about the fact that we have a green premium, to our product, but actually, we are competing head on and can be cheaper than imports because we have a logistical premium of producing it at home. Right? Paraguay alone is the 4th largest exporter of soybean, and it gives you an idea that actually, if you are a country which has large imports of fertilizer, large exports of agri products, large exports of power, you are in a country which has a very strong financial situation. It's BB+ rating. It's obviously very easy for us to sell tax-free our products into Brazil without having the political risk that you would have had you been in Brazil. Next slide. And our first project, Villeta. So why did we choose Villeta? So Villeta is the largest industrial port in Paraguay. It is the port where you actually import all of the fertilizer and export the agri products, so such as soybean I mentioned. So from an infrastructure point of view, we are right next to our markets, and that's quite key to reduce the costs of getting our products to our market. If you look on that slide, the little green dot is the substation of Ande where we get our power from. And it's a brand new substation built by Siemens. So we don't have any infrastructure costs attached to the supply of power. We bought the site about a year ago. And since then, obviously, we have negotiated the largest industrial power purchase agreement with Ande, which is a 20-year, so 10+10 term power supply at the industrial price of around $31 a megawatt hour. And we have hired AECOM as owner's engineer. So AECOM is one of the largest US engineering firm. I think they have built nearly or have been involved into the construction of half of the US's large power facilities. We announced that we had added Natixis as financial advisor, as well as the IDB, so the Inter-American Development Bank, as the development financial institution advisors. So obviously, this is a project which has a very high development impact, let alone the carbon impact. So it is a prime candidate for financing institutions like IFC, like the World Bank, and especially IDB, who's taking the lead to merit financing, and which is very much what I said earlier. When I was at the IFC, it was all about how do you make sure that you have projects with the management team, with the credibility, and of course, which is in the middle of a fairway of the development impact and the green credential that these institutions are looking for. So since then, we ensured that we had followed the environment and social performance standards expected from that. So we have hired JGP, which is one of the regular consultants that the IDB and the IEC are using. And we have also hired Nexant to do the market study to prove to the lenders that we have a very competitive advantage of producing here and basically signing off on the actual price and the size of the market. And from front-end engineering and design, we are using Casale, which is the oldest fertilizer industrial licensor in the world. It's a Swiss company with over 100 years history, who actually made green ammonia back in the 1920s. And Urbas, which is a Spanish EPC firm specialized in power and hydrogen capacity. So if we want to go to the next slide, it gives you a little bit of an insight of the work that has been going on for over a year now into the engineering. So this little slide might look innocuous, but actually this is the first time anywhere that we are able to show, or that anybody is able to show a green fertilizer facility. And every one of these blocks, you have 6 processes mixed in, and I will show a video at the end of this presentation, basically doing a flyover of the plant. There is 0 technology risk attached to any of those, and that's quite important for us, right? We wanted to be very clear that we were presenting a project which only has execution risk attached to it. And so, which is where we are today, and you have now where we are in the process is actually a few months ago, we had received tax-free zone status from the government, and it was subject to completion of the environmental social impact assessment by local standards. So actually now that has been going through, and so we will be making the They say we are waiting for it to be done on decree. And obviously, Paraguay itself, part of Mercosur, it's not a high tax places. We're talking about 10% tax. But tax-free zone status allows us to reduce the tax on export at 0.5%. So it's nearly a $7 million per year impact on revenue. So it's not nothing, but it also shows the commitment that the government has to help push and create that industry. And we are now negotiating the EPC as we speak. And so we hope to have finalized the contract over the next couple of months so that we can have final investment decision by Q4 2023, as we are negotiating at the moment offtake agreement and equity and debt at the asset level. So the next slide shows this slide shows you that we're actually already in negotiation for a phase 2, which will be 300 megawatt. So Ande has already reserved for us 300 megawatt from the Ygazu substation, which is this little picture you see here on the right. And actually, this is a 1 gigawatt substation, which was commissioned in June. So we already have capacity reserve, and we are going through the studies like we did with our first project in Villeta before negotiating the final power purchase agreement. Next slide. I think in here we talk about Costa Rica, which is the National Ammonia Corporation JV, where we were looking for places which had a lot of similarity for Villeta, because obviously we don't have, our IP is really on our business model and the engineering that we are putting together with Villeta. So where can we go and replicate and copy paste about 18 months of work? And Costa Rica was a great candidate. Its grid is 99% renewable. And it's a very large agri country and agri region as well, which develops premium products such as pineapple. So it's a great candidate as well for have regional availability of regional fertilizer production and green fertilizer production. So this is moving quite nicely. It's in JV with Grupo Purdi, which is one of the largest corporates in the country. I think they make about $400 million per year, and already have experience into the hydrogen sector through its mobility side. Next slide, please. So it's Iceland. So we mentioned earlier that clearly for us, the low-hanging fruit of today is agriculture. But we are keeping a keen eye on shipping, which is where for us Iceland has a real advantage. And obviously it is a bit later on. We're talking about 26, 27. We had already signed some heads of term on power, but these are very much heads on term. So as the Icelandic power sector has had some negative effect from what happened in Ukraine. So that project has gone a lot slower, and obviously, shipping itself has also gone a bit slower. So for us, it's an option for the future that we continue exploring, but the absolute focus is delivering Villeta first, and then moving on very quickly to a phase 2 and to Costa Rica. Next slide, please. So from a news flow point of view, some of you who know us, we've ordered a 1 megawatt electrolyzer on the mobility side to pretty much, test the market in Paraguay. So we still expect to have delivery by the end of this year of the first electrolyzer. Importantly, is Villeta is absolutely the focus for us. So ending front-end engineering and design by the end of this year, negotiating the offtake agreements. The final investment decision for the project, again, expecting by the end of this year, and then obviously Costa Rica and phase 2 of Ygazu. Next slide. And from a corporate point of view, as I mentioned, so we were listed in December 21. So I think the last high level, biggest announcement we made was in May. Baker Hughes, which is one of the largest energy engineering firm in the world, I think it's about $27 billion, became an investor in Atome. So they took about a 6% position in order to have a right to supply hydrogen compressors. But this right doesn't give them, it's not a preferential right as such, in the sense that it's not an exclusivity. So they're able to submit a bid earlier than most, and obviously, but they still have to be competitive, both on price and both on delivery time. But also it's a partnership discussion where they see a number of projects globally. So we are able to have these discussions and look at, okay, where else could we grow and maybe grow together. So we've done a lot since listing, but our share price has hovered, I think, around the 100 mark. And at the same time, just this little gray line shows that unfortunately the AIM markets have been suffering quite drastically, and especially the new tech environment side of the AIM listed companies. I think, however, we've been pretty resilient, but obviously we're not exactly satisfied. I'm a significant shareholder in the company, but it's not, there were no free shares in there. I put money at the same time as all of the investors at the same price. And so did Peter. So from a management point of view, we are very, very incentivized to make sure that the company is successful. So I think that ends the presentation itself, but I will go into the video so that you get a bit of a sense of what a green fertilizer facility looks like. So I will share my screen, and please let me know as soon as you see the screen. Yeah. So this is available again on Vimeo. It's a publicly available document, and so it's pretty much Urbas and Casale who have done all of the engineering, and this is the design of the plant made by them. Right, this is not an Atome internal document. It is an internal document, but it was produced by our engineers as they're putting the facility together. So in here you see the fenced area and the gate on the top right. As I mentioned, this is a tax-free zone status, so you need to have a customs at the entrance of it. So if we start the flow, this gives you a sense of the scale. We're talking about the use of around 20 hectares of land. You see the offices in the middle, and the big building on the top left is where the electrolyzers are being housed. So you may remember that, I mean, you don't see it from here, but just behind us is actually the road across where you have the substation of Ande, where the power comes from. It will come into transformers on the right and straight into this very large building, which houses the electrolyzers. On the top left, what you see in red is the storage for the water and the water treatment plant behind it. So we get our water from directly from the Paraguay River. So if you wanted to give a sense of how much water we would be using, we're looking at using 0.006% of the daily flow of that water at peak. So it's absolutely negligible, but clearly you have to make it ultra pure water so that you can use it into an industrial process. And you have the cooling towers on the left, which are quite important. Obviously, the ammonia loop generates a lot of heat, so you have to constantly cool all of your system. These two little white tanks that you are seeing is actually the hydrogen storage tanks, which are important for the buffers into the system. So we will now go into the hydrogen building. And so where you see banks of 5 megawatt electrolyzers, so we actually, even though we have 145 megawatt PPA, we will be using 120 megawatt of power. And out of 120 megawatt across the entire plant, we will use around 100 megawatt for the electrolyzers. But what we are doing is we're designing it for 110 megawatt of electrolyzers so that we always have a buffer in case one of the electrolyzers needs servicing. Once you have used the electrolyzers, you are now producing hydrogen, and the hydrogen will go into these yellow compressors, which is the hydrogen compressors. And this white tank vertical tank that you see is the air separation unit, which basically takes the nitrogen out of the air. So ammonia is NH3, so I have the H in through the compressors and the N through the white air separation unit, which then goes into the blue process on the bottom right, which is the Haber-Bosch process from Casale. Again, a very basic old technology. And that combines the H and the N into NH3, which is then stored into this white tank on the bottom right of the picture. On the left side, what you have is actually the nitric acid unit, where the ammonia is further concentrated with more nitrogen, with some oxygen to create nitric acid, which is then stored on these white tanks on the top right. What you do is once you have your ammonium nitrate solution, using obviously concentrating ammonia and nitric acid, you would mix that ANS solution with dolomite or limestone, which is on the bottom right, which is basically you have rocks which are crushed, goes into this tall square building on the top left, mixing that solution, a liquid solution of ammonium nitrate, with the rocks, which then becomes imbibed and crushed, so that then it goes into the storage facilities that you see over here. So we're now going to go slowly into the storage facility. So obviously this is a pretty long storage facility at the moment. So it's all stored in large quantities, and then some of it will be exported in trucks. Basically, this is CAN is it's a stable fertilizer by itself. You don't have any safety risk attached to it, and some of it will be stored in big bags. So these 1,000 kilogram plus bags. And you will have a choice as a customer to take away either in large quantities or in big bags unit and then export it. And it shows you how the products then goes outside of the plant, either onto the barges into the river, which will then be exported onto the Atlantic, into Brazil, into Argentina, or trucked in Paraguay, or actually into the west of Brazil. So I will stop the presentation here. I took a bit longer than expected. Sorry about that. But now I'll open it for questions.